Hi, I'm here in Cleveland, Ohio, and I am really delighted to have a conversation with Mark Bowman in Chicago. Mark is the founder, creator, and director of the LGBTQ Religious Archives Network. Mark, thanks for having this conversation with me.
Thank you, Andy, and colleagues in the Open and Affirming Coalition. It is a delight to be here with you.
So could you tell us, what is the Religious Archives Network?
Sure, that's a great question to start with, Andy. The LGBTQ Religious Archives Network is really the foremost resource available on the history of LGBTQ religious movements around the world. And so we have three primary purposes. First, we encourage and support leaders and groups in getting their papers and records preserved in appropriate repositories. Secondly, we provide a treasure trove of information about LGBTQ religious history on our website. And then thirdly, we encourage educational research and scholarship and teaching about queer religious history around the world.
Thank you, Mark. So why are you doing this work? Why do you think it's important to have an archive of queer religious history?
Yeah, that's again, it's important to talk about, Andy. Our mantra here is history is written from the perspective of those who preserve their records. I'll say that again. History is written from the perspective of those who preserve their records. We believe that LGBTQ religious movements have had and are continuing to have a profound impact upon social and religious institutions in this country and around the world. And therefore, we've got to make sure our voices are heard and told, and that won't happen if we don't preserve our history. So we have got to preserve the records, papers, stories, to make sure that we are known and read and studied in the future as part of the significant part of this world.
And I imagine that a lot of the secular histories of the LGBTQ movement, and there are many of them, hundreds of books and archives and records, that a lot of those focus on secular LGBTQ history, but you're the only real compendion of accessible information about queer history in churches and other faith communities.
Yes, we believe we really do have a critical mission, Andy, because too often, for a variety of reasons, religion and spirituality just gets overlooked in queer history of other kinds. And so we believe that it's really critical. Yes, as we know, religion has often been oppressive to LGBT folks, and that's probably the reason why some people are not so interested in looking at religion. But we believe that, frankly, religion and religious groups and spiritual groups have been a key part of the development of of queer history, and that we've got to look at that and remember that.
And these communities, which started long before the Open and Affirming Coalition, they really were at first a sanctuary for LGBTQ people of faith, but they also were platforms, really, communities that would advocate so that the world would know and our neighbors would know that that LGBTQ people also are people of faith,
Yes.
and that we have a place in churches and synagogues and other faith communities.
Yes, correct, Andy. And those meeting places, those nodes, were also often the birthplace of political activity. A lot of the early LGBT religious activity took place out of religious spaces or through religious groups back in the 60s and 70s.
So really the faith-based queer movement was born at the same time as the secular queer liberation movement in the 60s.
Certainly was, yes. Mm-hmm.
So Mark, can you tell us something about the history of this project, when it started? And
yes, my background, Andy, is activism within the United Methodist traditions and then within the ecumenical welcoming church movement. And I would notice from time to time in my work, I would be speaking in settings and I would mention the names of persons who were my mentors. If you were in the UCC coalition, you would think of Bill Johnson, Nancy Crody. And I would say these in places and people would say to me, who are you talking about? I don't know these people. And I would be horrified. You know, these are the people who made it possible for us to be where we are today. So we've got to know these stories. So I was interested in seeing that our history could be preserved. So I approached Chicago Theological Seminary here, which was doing research and study on gay and lesbian issues. And we started conversation about what it would be like to work on history. We were lucky that the Carpenter Foundation provided a seed grant to explore what options might be. And we began thinking that we would actually be a physical repository that would collect and store papers. But as I started talking to activists and archivists and historians, what I heard was there's already a lot of places to put papers. However, we don't know where everything is. We need some kind of information clearinghouse, a gateway of some kind to know where to find information. So if you think back 20 years ago, this was just the emergence of the internet being widely used. And so it was a convergence of the desire for history with electronic and digital technology becoming available that enabled us to create something very different and unusual in terms of a grassroots information clearinghouse on queer religious history.
And that means, Mark, doesn't it, that while you provide a gateway to existing archives, you yourself do not collect papers?
Correct. That's the most common misunderstanding, Andy. People say, "Oh, great! I've got some papers I want to send you." We are glad to help you find the appropriate place to put your papers, but we do not accept and store papers.
That's right. Thanks, Mark. Now, I got to say, as a frequent user of your website and your resources, I'm not a scholar. I'm not doing scholarly research on queer studies, but I'm interested in the history of those who came before me, especially since I didn't come out till I was the age of 40. And there were generations who came before me who made it possible for me to take that stand in the United Church of Christ as an openly gay man with confidence. So I just find reading those histories to be just inspiring. It helps me in my work. And often I get to learn a lot I did not know about people that are part of our movement. Yeah. And it's just an amazing journey of discovery, I think, for anybody who's using your website. And having said that,
I have a fun job, Andy. I get to hear all these stories myself. Can you imagine how much fun this is? This is a pure delight.
Absolutely. And having said that, could you take us on a tour and show us some of the resources and how they're formatted and how you can access them?
Certainly, glad to do that, Andy. So our website, and you can see the URL, it's www.lgbtqreligiousarchives.org. And so you come to our homepage, and as you scroll down, you see that we have we have some primary sections. We have biographical profiles, we have oral histories, we have a collections catalog, and then we have some resources about how you can preserve your records. That's about collecting. And then we have educational resources, online exhibitions, and some teaching resources. We began as a collections catalog. As I referred early on, we were the place where you could go and you could find where to find papers and records on queer religious history in different repositories, mostly in the US, but we do have records from around the world. You can scroll down this page. There are more than 300 collections. The collection, I commend the Open and Affirming Coalition for actually doing a good starting job of getting your papers and records preserved. Here's the entry for the Open and Affirming collections. And as you scroll down the page, you see the information about what's in that particular collection, some historical note about it, and then where to find it. And then often you will find a technical archive word is finding aid. So if you have a collection of papers, the archives will put together a finding aid, which is a detailed listing of what else in that collection. And that's critical to scholars in research to know what to find, what they will find there before they want to do that. So this is what you would look up before you actually went to go to an archive to look at the papers.
Mark, before you continue, I just want to do a shout out here for Marnie Warner, one of the early activists of our movement, who is responsible for putting together the coalition's archives at the Congregational Library and
And
Archives.
she's done an extensive work volunteering with the Congregational Library to make sure those records are there, and not only there, but processed so that they can be accessible to scholars. That's really an important step, which we don't often realize. The most popular part of our website is the profiles. You and I talked about stories and wonderful stories and histories of people. Most people get to our website because they're looking up a particular person, a queer religious activist, and they often, the Google search will get them to our website. So here you will see we have more than 550 biographical profiles of leaders of LGBTQ religious movements, and we're adding profiles all the time. You can click on one. For example, here is Marie Castellanos, and you can look down and we have photographs, and basically we try to tell the person's life story and then their LGBTQ activism and where they were and where they were involved. And so that's all the information you can find there. The other part of our website is critical data is oral histories. You may have heard oral histories. They're extensive recorded interviews, and we do audio interviews. We don't do video. And these are important for people who may not have papers and records. Otherwise, their history is not available. And so we record them recalling their stories and what has happened. And what's unusual about us is these oral histories are readily available. You can go on our website right here and you can read the transcript of the whole interview, or you can listen to it. So you can hear the audio interview. So, so that's there. And that's readily available. A quick note, if you want to find things, we have tags on our website. All the records are tagged, and there are different groups of tags. There are faith tags you'll see here, person tags, subject tags, geography tags. But you might want to go under faith and look at United Church Coalition. And here you can find all of our records that relate to the United Church of Christ or the Congregational Church. So you will see first they'll list a bunch of profiles, and I think you and I counted there are more than 40 profiles, Andy, of people from the United Church of Christ. You'll see oral history interviews, and then finally the archival collections and the collections catalog that relate to the United Church of Christ. So there's a lot of information, and you could spend a lot of time and get lost kind of wandering through this information. The kind of fun thing we do is that in addition to those databases, we actually create online exhibitions, which is a collection of artifacts. Imagine you're walking into a museum to see, and you would see display cases with artifacts and stories. And so we do that digitally around our history. We have two that might be of interest to coalition folks. First, on the historic ordination of William R. Johnson, you find the timeline here, the steps that happened, and then a lot of the actual documents that happened. Here's a sermon that was preached, that Bill Johnson preached at the Metropolitan Community Church in LA. So you can find documents in digital form that you can actually look at here within the exhibition. And so you can spend a lot of time. There's actually a video of Bill's ordination a lot here. So that's one great exhibition. Another exhibition that would be of interest to coalition folks, it's a newer one. It's called Sisterhood is Powerful, and it's the historic ordination of three lesbians, Loie Powell, Stacy Kasulos, and Jody Parsons, that happened in Berkeley in Northern California in 1973. Again, there's extensive information here, photographs, stories, recordings, and documents that you can look at. So that's just some of the extensive information that you can find scrolling and looking through our website, Andy.
That's wonderful, Mark, and thank you for that tour. Like I said, I just like to sometimes when I need encouragement, I'm feeling kind of down for some reason, going to your website just reminds me of the people who made our movement possible and what they still teach us and teach me. Before we conclude, could you tell us how we can, in the coalition, support your ministry and help you expand?
Sure, there's actually a couple of things. First of all, to preserve your history. I think you probably are all aware that the United Church of Christ was one of the early religious institutions in the US to face head on LGBTQ issues and to often respond positively. And so those of you in the United Church of Christ have a particularly important and valuable story that's got to be preserved for the future. So again, while you have preserved extensive records, being sure that biographical profiles of your leaders, papers, which you might have some newsletters and things in your own particular records from early days. If so, see that those get into a repository somewhere so that history is done. So continuing to support each other to make sure that your stories and memories are, and your legacy is there for the future. You may be impressed with all the work we do at our website. We do a lot of great things with a very small resources. You folks in the coalition know what this is like, how we do a whole lot with limited resources. We have a variety of part-time staff altogether. We barely make a full-time staff person. So we do extensive work, but we need help from volunteers. So as you notice things in our website that are missing, wow, there should be, this person's story should be there, that should be there, let us know. Help us, let us know that information that's missing. And if you're able to interview someone or help us gather that information, please let us know that. And of course, finally, just have to mention that, we are supported purely by the grassroots contributions of our constituents. And so if you enjoy a story and you're willing to make a contribution so that we can create and collect more stories, that is greatly appreciated, Andy.
Mark, thanks so much. And again, what an honor it is to interview you. I've known of your work for the entire time that I've been executive director of the coalition. It really has helped a lot of people. And I also know that there are millennial and Generation Z queer people who are active and already are responsible for life-changing ministries in the United Church of Christ. And those stories will be told too.
Well, let me commend you on your 50th anniversary and all the great activities and program you've done this weekend in terms of recalling and remembering and building your story. We build on the past to go into the future. So again, commendations to you and to the leadership and to the members of the coalition.
Mark, thanks so much.